Thank you. I was born on April 16th, 1908, on what is now West Main Street, about a block and a half from the Dan River Cotton Mills. My parents were Mrs. Priscilla Hooper and Reverend Reuben H. Hooper. I am one of 10 children, 9 girls and 1 boy, the 8th in number. My father died. I was rather young when my father died, and my mother did a wonderful job in training these 10 children. I wouldn't give anything for the background, the instructions that I received from her. Some of my co-workers in teaching, after the women became more liberated a few years ago, talking about how glad they were that they could now do some of the things that women began doing. But I was so glad that I had that background that my mother gave me. Those principles that she instilled in me will follow me to my grave. Of course, my father worked in the cotton mill, but as I said, he died when I was rather young. And she took in washing. And of course, as soon as we were able, we had to do little jobs. She taught us that there is nothing wrong with making an honest living. And she taught us to live within our means. And I can appreciate that so very much today. Well, I must have been around five or six when we walked up the railroad a part of the year, part of one winter. I walked up that railroad from Schoolfield to Lovetown because I was very small. And then we moved to Coleman Town, which is now Chatelain Avenue. And after we moved there, I went to the Almagro School. It was then called the Pennsylvania Industrial Institute, I believe. And I went over there. When I went over there, I started in the 3rd grade. And I went on through the 11th grade. So I finished the 11th grade over there. And by that time, they had added the 12th grade to the Presbyterian Industrial School, High School on Harvard Street. So I went there and took my 12th year in high school. Now the little school where I got in the very beginning was a little one-room school. I think a lodge used to have its meetings in there, but it was a little one-room school. Mrs. Agnes Adams was the teacher. But I remember how she taught us the table. 5 times 5 is 25, and 5 times 6 is 30, 5 times 7 is 35, and 5 times 8 is 40. So that's where she taught us the table. And then the time, see that neat little clock on the mantel stand, it points to the minutes with the 2 slender hand, 1 person minute, the other person hour. It's all that I've seen on the high church tower. It's all that I've seen on the high church tower. But those are 2 things in particular I remember about those first few weeks or months of mine in school. Almagro had 4 rooms. Later they added rooms. Mrs. Annabelle Claiborne was the principal when I first began over there. And Mrs. S.M.A. Donahue, Mrs. Amanda Luck, and Mrs. Cordelia Hardy were the 4 teachers there. My favorite subjects were English and math. Arithmetic it was called at that time. And I'm glad to say that I got a very good foundation in both. Of course, my mother with all those girls there was rather strict with us, and so I was not permitted to have company. And I left home, I was 17, I believe, when I went away to college, and I had not, of course, had company at home before I left for college. So it means that I had no share of miles, I must admit. College. I received a scholarship from Knoxville, Tennessee, after finishing Presbyterian school. But I had a sister who was living in West Virginia at that time, so I went out and lived with her and went to Bluefield State Teachers College, it was called at that time. My major was English. Well, at that time, people could go to the Teachers College and take a 1-year short normal course, 2-year standard normal, and then of course those people who could afford it could take their 4-year college. As I was not able to do that, so I took 1-year short normal course. Then I taught in the winter, went to school in summer for 5 years. Then I went back to college and completed my college course and came to Danville and secured a job in the English department of the, at that time, Westmoreland High School, and then which later became the John M. Langston High School. And there I remained until 1966 when I retired. I began teaching, I returned to Danville and began teaching at at the then Westmoreland High School in 1933 and taught there until 1966 when I retired.
Let's start.
I began teaching in Westmoreland High School at $52 a month. My next increase, with my next increase, I received $57 a month. And after 33 years of teaching in high school in Danville, Virginia, I retired not having made as much as $6,000 a year. My last year teaching, I got an increase of $500, which means that that year I made $5,500. When I came into the system, Mr. G.L.H. Johnson was the superintendent. And in one of our faculty meetings, when something was said about increasing the teacher's salary, we were told that if you Negress can come into my office and show me that it takes as much for you to live as it does a white teacher, I'll increase your salary. I don't know where he had the idea that there was a price of one price for coal and meat and bread and clothes and all for the Negress and another for the whites. But that is what we were told. From the time I left home in 25 through 33 was spent in West Virginia, either because I was either in school or in summer school. But when I came home, of course, at Christmas time or during the summer, when I came home in 32, he was a pastor of the Trinity Church. And of course, I just hadn't been interested in a preacher as a boyfriend. I just hadn't been interested in her. But he became interested in me. And he pursued me for the next 10 years. So in 1942, he wore down my resistance. And we were married. For some reason, I just hadn't been interested in the ministers of boyfriend. It just hadn't been, although I had my share of ministers interested in me. He passed it there until he retired, December 31st, 1961.
What fond memories you have about teaching?
Well, personally, I was really interested in teaching. Otherwise, I could not have stayed in the room as a classroom as long as I did. I would have had to do some other kind of work. But I was interested in teaching, and I don't know, I just wanted to just get it into the heads anyway, when they were interested and when they were not. And, well, when I went in there, I didn't know the professional people in Danville. I didn't have any organization that to be supported by you're doing for me. You what is it saying? You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. You sell. I just got the name of being the hardest teacher I really ever hit down. And so the children just weren't accustomed to having to study, but I knew this. Many of those poor parents were sacrificing, some of them working day and night, trying to keep those children in school, give them an education, give them the advantages that they themselves had not had. And I could not see myself letting those children come to my class day after day and waste their parents' time. And so they just had to produce the work if they wanted to pass the grade. They didn't get grades on whose relatives they are. My nieces and nephews finished there, and they thought I was harder on them than I was on the others. But as I said, I didn't know any doctors. I didn't know any school principals. I didn't know any professional people when it came to producing the work in my classroom. You did the work and you got the grades. We used to, when the GW High School got new books, we got their old books. We were kept in a supply of old books until after the integration. Then we became a part of the committee. Just ever so often now when I go out, I meet some former student of mine, and some of them telling that, you always were my favorite teacher. I could appreciate knowing some of that then, but I know peer pressure and all of that. But it makes it all worthwhile, man. Every time when somebody meets me and says, you are responsible for my being where I am now. I'm so glad I had the opportunity to attend your class and all of that, all of those things. It's just makes it all worthwhile.
I can truly say I've known Miss Thorpe all of my life. Miss Thorpe taught my mom and dad at Westmoreland High School many years ago. So when I was, my dad was a deacon in the church when I was born, so from as old as 2 or 3 years old, when I was old enough to go to church, he took me to Sunday school and on to church service. So at that time, Ms. Thorpe's husband, Reverend Thorpe, was a pastor. And so I was raised right there on the deacon's bench with Reverend Thorpe in the pulpit and Ms. Thorpe on the second or third pew back. Ms. Thorpe is one of my idols. You know, she's from the little time I was just a little boy on up, you know. She had that quiet demeanor where she always was in control of the situation, always smiling, never let things really upset her. Not only at church, whatever the situation, but at school. So that type of person demands respect because you can't help yourself in their presence to be respectful of them. She never had to raise her voice. When she spoke, everybody listened. So she's always been that special type of person, being someone I always wanted to be like. And that was the type of person she was and is, and the type of teacher that she was. So I'd always heard so many stories about, don't take Miss Thorpe's class, she was hard. Miss Thorpe was hard. But I said, I know Miss Thorpe. I grew up with Miss Thorpe, so I didn't really worry about it so much, you know. I figured if I did my work, I'd be all right. So, so that's what I went in with, that type of attitude. And that's just the way she was, too. I mean, if you got your work done, Miss Thorpe was never a problem. And I never, but that's the good thing about it. The people that feared her didn't want to work. Didn't want to work. If you wanted to do your work, you didn't have a problem. So the one thing that she demanded from you was respect and decorum. And we tried to give her that. The kids that I knew, that I came out with my class. When I got to college, I was totally in a foreign land out at Fisk, and I thought that I would be kind of lost around other students, you know, they're coming from all different parts of the country. But I also knew that I had a pretty decent foundation. So coming through Langston, so once you're out there and you get to meet other people, you already know if you've been raised in the right way, how to conduct yourself in all situations. So I can say that easily that Miss Thorpe was one of my idols because I took that type of attitude with me through life. Still do. Still do.
If I had not, as I said, I could not have stayed there all that time. I enjoyed every minute in the classroom, but as I said, knowing the feeling of some of the children toward coming to my class made it a little unpleasant, not as pleasant as it would have been otherwise. But still at that, I had a job to do. And I went there with the full intention of doing my job to the best of my ability. And from the comments that come from various former teachers now, apparently I didn't do a bad job.
She will be surprised to hear this, and if any students hear this, they'll be totally surprised. When I first met her, I was scared to death. I was just simply terrified. She had this beautiful smile and these eyes that I did not interpret correctly. So for about 9 months, I did whatever she told me to do, and I stayed out of her way as much as I could. I didn't realize at the time that I was forming a philosophy based on Miss Thorpe's guidance. I was 23 years old, had only taught 1 year in high school, and I had done fairly well with that, I suppose, but 23-year-old kids don't have their philosophy together. They don't know what they believe. And I'm grateful to Miss Thorpe because she didn't know this. She doesn't know this. This is the first time she's hearing this, that she helped me form a philosophy of what I believe about life. Now, how did she do that? Since I was so afraid of her. I guess maybe I learned everything she said to me. I remembered it. That's one thing. And then I liked the way she handled her classroom. Now, she said she was the strictest teacher at Langston, and I was probably the second. And students tell me today, oh, we hated you then. But could you come teach our kids? No, I'm finished. So that's how we met in '59, and I guess we worked together until '6. Okay, so I stayed there until '69, and then we all went over to Geneva.
Thank you. It's so very nice. It is so nice to hear so many times, and people thought that I was so strict. Some of them said mean, so strict and all. That's nice to be able to live, to hear them say that they've reached a point that they can't appreciate what I was trying to do for them. To our former students of John M. Langston High School,